The morning sun cast long shadows across the weapon maintenance station as Staff Sergeant Maria Santos methodically disassembled the Barrett M82 sniper rifle. Her hands moved with practiced precision, each component placed exactly where it belonged on the clean white cloth spread beneath her work area. The smell of gun oil and metal cleaner filled the small concrete building that served as the armory for Forward Operating Base Blackwater in Afghanistan. Maria had been the unit's primary armorer for 18 months, a role that earned her respect, but also skepticism from some of the operators who questioned whether a woman could truly understand the intricate mechanics of their weapons. She had proven them wrong countless times, diagnosing problems that stumped other technicians and keeping their equipment running flawlessly in the harsh desert environment. The door opened with a metallic creak, and Master Sergeant Jake Morrison stepped inside. At 6'3" with broad shoulders and arms marked by old shrapnel scars, Morrison commanded immediate attention wherever he went. He was the team's lead sniper, a man whose reputation for impossible shots had become legendary throughout the special operations community. His presence always made the small armory feel even smaller. "Santos," Morrison nodded, setting his rifle case on the adjacent workbench. "Got a problem with the Schmidt scope. Tracking seems off by about 2 minutes of angle to the left." Maria looked up from her work, nodding the slight concern in Morrison's weathered face. A 2-minute deviation at long range could mean the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure. She wiped her hands on a clean rag and moved to examine his weapon. The rifle Morrison carried was a custom-built platform based on the Remington 700 Action, chambered in .338 Lapua Magnum. Every component had been hand-selected and precisely fitted to create a system capable of delivering devastating accuracy at extreme distances. Maria ran her fingers along the scope mounts, checking for any signs of loosening or damage. "When did you first notice the deviation?" she asked, her voice professional and focused. "Yesterday's range session. Put 5 rounds at 800 meters and they were grouping left of center. Thought it might be wind at first, but conditions were dead calm." Maria nodded, understanding the implications immediately. Morrison was too experienced to make basic wind reading errors, and his natural point of aim was renowned for its consistency. If he said the scope was tracking incorrectly, it almost certainly was. She carefully removed the scope from its mounts, examining the internal mechanisms through the adjustment turrets. The Schmidt and Bender optic was among the finest in the world, but even the best equipment could develop problems under the constant stress of combat operations and extreme environmental conditions. "I'll need to check the tracking box and verify the internal mechanisms," Maria explained. "Might take a few hours to diagnose properly." Morrison leaned against the workbench, crossing his arms. "You know, Santos, I've been thinking about something lately. We've got this ongoing debate in the team about whether precision shooting is more about the shooter or the equipment." Maria glanced up from the scope, sensing there was more to this conversation than casual curiosity. "Both matter, but the shooter is ultimately what makes the difference. Best rifle in the world won't hit anything if the person behind it doesn't understand ballistics and environmental factors." "Exactly what I figured you'd say, but here's the thing that's been bothering me. You know more about these weapons than most of us operators do. You understand their capabilities, their limitations, their ballistic characteristics. But you've never actually proven you can use that knowledge under pressure." The comment hung in the air like smoke from a fired round. Maria set down her tools and looked directly at Morrison, recognizing the challenge in his tone. This wasn't the first time someone had questioned whether her technical knowledge translated to practical shooting ability. "What exactly are you suggesting, Morrison?" "I'm suggesting that maybe it's time you showed everyone that you're not just good at cleaning and fixing our weapons. Maybe it's time you proved you can actually shoot them." Maria felt her pulse quicken, but she kept her expression neutral. She had been shooting since childhood, learning from her father who had served as a Marine Corps scout sniper in Vietnam. Her technical knowledge came from years of study, but her shooting skills came from thousands of hours of practice on civilian ranges and hunting trips. "You want me to prove something to the team?" she asked quietly. Morrison pushed himself off the workbench, his expression serious but not hostile. "I want you to prove something to yourself, Santos. You've got all the knowledge and skills, but you've never had the chance to show what you can really do. These guys respect technical competence, but they worship practical ability." He paused, studying her face for any signs of backing down. "I'll make you a deal. You fix my scope problem, and I'll take you out to the long-range course tomorrow morning. We'll see if you can walk the walk as well as you talk the talk." Maria considered the proposition carefully. She knew her shooting abilities were solid, but she had never tested them under the scrutiny of special operations professionals who lived and died by their marksmanship skills. The opportunity was both exciting and terrifying. "What kind of challenge are we talking about?" she asked. Morrison smiled for the first time since entering the armory. "Nothing too complicated. Standard precision shooting test. Multiple distances, multiple positions, environmental challenges. Same qualification course we all had to pass to earn our positions on this team." "And if I pass?" "If you pass, you'll have earned the respect of every operator in this unit. They'll stop questioning your expertise and start treating you like the professional you are." Maria nodded slowly, understanding that this was about more than just proving her shooting ability. It was about earning acceptance in a community that valued demonstrated competence above all else. She had spent 18 months proving her technical skills, but practical application remained unproven territory. "And if I fail?" Morrison's expression became serious again. "If you fail, nothing changes. You're still our armorer, still doing excellent work, but you'll know you tried, and that matters more than most people realize." Maria looked down at the partially disassembled scope in her hands, considering all the implications of Morrison's challenge. She thought about the countless hours she had spent studying ballistics charts, environmental factors, and weapon systems. She thought about her father's patient instruction during her teenage years, teaching her to read wind and calculate range with the same precision that Morrison now demanded from his operators. "Give me until tomorrow afternoon to fix your scope," she said finally. "Then we'll see if all that technical knowledge is worth anything when it really counts." Morrison extended his hand, and Maria shook it firmly. The deal was struck, and she could already feel the weight of expectation settling on her shoulders like a heavy pack before a long mission. As Morrison left the armory, Maria turned her attention back to the scope with renewed focus. She had committed herself to a test that would either validate years of preparation or expose the limitations of theoretical knowledge when confronted with practical demands. The afternoon passed quickly as she worked through the diagnostic process, testing tracking mechanisms and verifying optical alignment with specialized equipment. The problem revealed itself gradually. A microscopic piece of debris had worked its way into the elevation adjustment mechanism, causing the subtle but critical deviation that Morrison had detected. By evening, the scope was functioning perfectly again, its tracking verified through multiple test procedures. But Maria's real test would come tomorrow, when she would have to prove that her understanding of precision shooting extended beyond technical specifications and into the realm of practical application. She cleaned her workspace methodically, organizing tools and components with the same attention to detail that she brought to every aspect of her work. Tomorrow would determine whether 18 months of professional respect could be transformed into something deeper, the kind of acceptance that came only from proven performance under pressure. The sun set behind the mountains surrounding the forward operating base, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. Maria finished her work and secured the armory, knowing that tomorrow would bring either validation or humiliation, but certain that either outcome was better than never testing her abilities at all. As she walked back to her quarters, she could feel the weight of Morrison's challenge settling into her mind like the familiar weight of a rifle in her hands. Tomorrow would prove whether years of preparation had created a true marksman or simply a very knowledgeable technician who had never faced the ultimate test of practical application. The alarm clock's harsh buzzing cut through the pre-dawn darkness at 500 hours. Maria had barely slept, her mind cycling through ballistic calculations and environmental considerations that would affect her performance on the shooting course. She dressed quickly in her standard ACU uniform, adding a baseball cap to keep the sun out of her eyes during the morning session. The mess hall was nearly empty, except for a few early-rising support personnel and night shift guards coming off duty. Maria grabbed black coffee and a simple breakfast, knowing that heavy food could affect her stability and breathing during precision shooting. Her stomach felt tight with nervous energy, but she forced herself to eat methodically. Morrison appeared at precisely 5:30, carrying 2 rifle cases and a range bag filled with ammunition and supporting equipment. His expression was neutral, giving no indication of whether he expected her to succeed or fail. That uncertainty somehow made the challenge feel even more significant. "Ready for this, Santos?" he asked, setting his equipment on the table. "As ready as I'll ever be," Maria replied, finishing her coffee. "What exactly does this qualification course involve?" Morrison pulled out a laminated card showing various shooting positions and distance requirements. Standard Special Operations Precision Shooting Assessment. Starts at 200 meters with supported positions, works up to 800 meters unsupported. 5 rounds per stage, scored on group size and point of impact relative to point of aim. Maria studied the card, noting the progressively difficult requirements. The final stage required hitting a 10-inch target at 800 meters from the standing position, a challenge that separated truly skilled marksmen from casual shooters. "What weapon system?" she asked. "Your choice. I brought my backup rifle, same platform as the one you fixed yesterday, but with a different scope. Or you can use one of the standard-issue M24 systems from the armory." Maria considered the options. The M24 was familiar and reliable, but Morrison's custom rifle offered superior accuracy potential. Using his weapon would also demonstrate confidence in her abilities and understanding of unfamiliar equipment. "I'll use your backup rifle," she decided. "Might as well test myself with the best available equipment." Morrison nodded approvingly. "Good choice. Shows you understand that precision shooting is about maximizing every advantage available." They left the mess hall and walked through the still dark base toward the firing range complex located on the northeastern perimeter. The morning air was cool and still, with visibility gradually improving as dawn approached. Perfect conditions for precision shooting, which meant Maria would have no environmental excuses if her performance fell short. The range facility consisted of multiple firing points extending from 200 to 1,000 meters, with target systems positioned across a wide valley flanked by rocky hills. Morrison led her to firing point 3, which offered clear lanes to all required distances for the qualification course. "First things first," Morrison said, setting up a shooting mat and equipment table. "Let's see how you handle basic weapon preparation." Maria unpacked Morrison's rifle, a beautifully crafted precision instrument built around a Remington 700 action with a custom barrel, adjustable stock, and loophole Mark IV scope. She examined the weapon systematically, checking the scope mounting, verifying that the barrel was clean, and ensuring that all mechanical components functioned smoothly. "Weapons in excellent condition," she reported. "Barrel's clean, scope mounts are tight, trigger breaks cleanly at approximately 3 pounds. What's the zero distance?" 200 meters, Morrison replied. "Last confirmed zero was 3 days ago, 5-shot group measuring 0.7 inches center to center." Maria nodded, calculating the ballistic trajectory in her head. The .338 Lapua cartridge Morrison used would drop approximately 7.5 inches at 400 meters, 21 inches at 600 meters, and 42 inches at 800 meters, assuming standard atmospheric conditions. She would need to verify these calculations against actual performance. Morrison handed her a box of custom-loaded ammunition. Federal 250-grain Sierra Match-King bullets over Retumbo powder, chronographed at 2,970 feet per second from this barrel. Maria examined the ammunition, noting the precise construction and consistent appearance that indicated careful hand-loading. She selected 5 rounds for the first stage, checking each cartridge for defects before loading them into the rifle's internal magazine. "Range safety brief," Morrison said formally. "Firing line is hot when I give the command. Muzzle discipline at all times. Cease fire immediately on my command or if you observe any unsafe conditions. Questions?" "No questions," Maria replied, settling into the prone position behind the rifle. The familiar weight and balance felt reassuring, reminding her of countless hours spent shooting with her father and later on civilian precision shooting courses. First stage is 200 meters prone supported position. 5 rounds for group, scored on accuracy and precision. Make ready. Maria chambered around and settled into her shooting position, using a bipod for front support and a small sandbag under the stock for rear stability. She adjusted her position until the rifle pointed naturally at the target, minimizing the muscular tension required to maintain proper sight alignment. Through the scope, the 200-meter target appeared clearly defined against the light-colored backstop. The aiming point was a 1-inch black circle that would require precise shot placement to achieve the group size Morrison expected from qualified operators. "Send it when ready," Morrison called. Maria controlled her breathing, allowing her natural respiratory pause to settle the rifle completely. The crosshairs aligned perfectly with the target center, and she applied steady pressure to the trigger until the rifle fired with a crisp break that surprised her timing, exactly as her father had taught her years earlier. The recoil was moderate but noticeable, the rifle tracking straight back without disturbing her sight picture. She worked the bolt smoothly, chambering the second round while maintaining her position behind the scope. 4 more shots followed in steady succession, each one fired during the natural respiratory pause that provided the most stable shooting platform. Maria focused entirely on the fundamentals her father had drilled into her: sight alignment, breathing control, trigger squeeze, and follow-through. "Cease fire," Morrison called. "Make safe and move to the target." Maria engaged the rifle's safety and followed Morrison downrange to examine her target. The walk seemed longer than usual, anticipation building with each step. Her performance on this first stage would set the tone for everything that followed. The target showed 5 holes grouped within a circle that Morrison measured carefully with calipers. "Excellent first stage, Santos." Group measures 0.8 inches center to center, with 4 of 5 shots inside 0.6 inches. "That's better than most of my operators manage on their first attempt." Maria felt a surge of confidence tempered by awareness that the distances would increase significantly. 200 meters was well within her comfort zone, but 800 meters would test every aspect of her shooting ability under Morrison's critical evaluation. "Second stage is 400 meters, Morrison announced as they returned to the firing line. "Same position, but you'll need to account for bullet drop and any wind effects." Maria studied the wind flags positioned between the firing point and target. The morning air remained relatively calm, with only slight movements indicating minimal wind influence. She calculated the required elevation adjustment and dialed the scope's turret to compensate for the increased distance. The 400-meter target appeared smaller through the scope, requiring more precise sight alignment and steady hold. Maria settled into position again, verifying that her body alignment remained natural and that the rifle pointed at the target without muscular force. "This is where technical knowledge starts paying dividends," Morrison observed quietly. "Most shooters can hit at 200 meters through raw ability. 400 meters requires understanding ballistics and environmental factors." Maria nodded, focusing on the sight picture while calculating wind drift and trajectory. The morning sun was beginning to warm the ground, which could create thermal currents that would affect bullet flight. She waited for a lull in the barely perceptible air movement before beginning her string of fire. The first shot felt identical to those fired at 200 meters, smooth trigger break, straight recoil, immediate return to sight picture for shot assessment. Through the scope, she could see the bullet hole appear slightly left of center, indicating a minor wind drift that she could compensate for on subsequent shots. She adjusted her point of aim slightly and fired the remaining 4 rounds, each one placed with increasing confidence as she refined her understanding of the environmental conditions. The rifle performed flawlessly, delivering consistent accuracy that validated Morrison's meticulous equipment preparation. "Impressive shooting, Santos," Morrison said after examining the 400-meter target. "Group size is just over 1 inch with excellent consistency. You clearly understand how to read conditions and make appropriate corrections." Maria felt growing confidence, but remained focused on the challenges ahead. 600 meters would test her ability to manage increased wind drift and trajectory calculation, while 800 meters would push her skills to their absolute limits. "Ready for 600?" Morrison asked. "Ready," Maria replied, though she could feel her pulse quickening as the distances extended toward the realm of true precision shooting that separated competent marksmen from exceptional ones. The morning was beginning to warm, and she noticed subtle changes in the wind patterns that would require constant attention and adjustment. The real test of her abilities was about to begin, and Morrison's increasing interest in her performance suggested that she was approaching the point where technical knowledge alone would no longer be sufficient. The 600-meter target appeared significantly smaller through the scope, requiring Maria to concentrate more intensely on sight alignment and breathing control. Morrison had adjusted the target size proportionally to maintain the same apparent difficulty, but the increased distance introduced new variables that would test her understanding of advanced ballistics. "Wind's picking up slightly," Morrison observed, pointing to the flags positioned at various intervals downrange. "See how that flag at 300 meters is showing a different direction than the one at 500? You'll need to read the wind in sections and estimate the average effect on your bullet's flight path." Maria studied the wind indicators carefully, noting the subtle variations in direction and intensity across the bullet's trajectory. The morning thermal activity was beginning as the sun warmed the ground unevenly, creating air currents that could deflect her shots unpredictably. She calculated the ballistic drop for 600 meters, approximately 21 inches below the line of sight, and dialed the appropriate elevation correction into the scope. The wind analysis was more complex, requiring her to estimate the average deflection across the entire flight path rather than simply reading conditions at the firing point. "Take your time with this stage," Morrison advised. 600 meters is where patience becomes as important as technical skill. Rush the shots, and you'll likely miss the environmental changes that separate good groups from mediocre ones. Maria settled into position, verifying that her body alignment remained consistent with the previous stages. The rifle felt familiar now, its balance and trigger characteristics becoming second nature as she adapted to Morrison's precision equipment. Through the scope, she could see heat waves beginning to rise from the dark-colored target frames, indicating that thermal currents would soon become a significant factor. She needed to complete this stage before the warming ground created unpredictable air movements that could affect her bullet's flight path. The first shot required careful timing as she waited for the wind to settle into a consistent pattern. When the flags showed uniform direction and velocity, she fired, watching the bullets trace through the scope as it arced toward the distant target. The shot impacted slightly high and right of center, indicating that her wind estimate had been conservative and her elevation calculation was close but not perfect. She adjusted her point of aim and prepared for the second shot, incorporating the new information about actual wind effects. Morrison watched intently as she fired the remaining 4 rounds, nodding her systematic approach to reading conditions and making corrections based on observed bullet impact. Each shot showed incremental improvement as she refined her understanding of the environmental factors affecting her accuracy. "Outstanding adaptation," Morrison commented after they examined the target. "Your first shot was your worst, and each subsequent shot showed better environmental reading. That's exactly what separates professional marksmen from recreational shooters." The 600-meter group measured 1.4 inches, with 4 of the 5 shots forming a tight cluster that indicated excellent technical consistency. Maria felt a surge of confidence, but she also recognized that 800 meters would present challenges that required every aspect of her training to come together perfectly. "Final standard stage is 800 meters, Morrison announced. "This is where we separate the wheat from the chaff. Most shooters who can handle 600 meters struggle significantly at 800 because the margin for error becomes so small." Maria nodded, understanding that the increased distance would magnify every imperfection in her shooting technique. A tiny error in sight alignment or trigger control that might go unnoticed at shorter ranges could easily cause a complete miss at 800 meters. She studied the wind conditions more carefully now, noting that the thermal activity was increasing as the sun climbed higher. The air movement patterns were becoming more complex, with different layers showing varying directions and velocities that would require sophisticated analysis to predict accurately. "Before we start the final stage," Morrison said, pausing in his equipment preparation, "I want you to understand something. You've already exceeded my expectations and proven that your technical knowledge translates directly to practical shooting ability. The 800-meter stage is extremely difficult even for experienced operators." Maria appreciated Morrison's encouragement, but she could sense that he was building toward something more challenging than the standard qualification course. His careful observation of her shooting technique and increasing interest in her performance suggested that this test was about more than simply verifying her basic competency. "I understand," Maria replied, but I want to see how far I can push these skills under your evaluation." Morrison smiled for the first time since they had begun shooting. "That's exactly the attitude I was hoping to see. You're not just trying to pass a test, you're trying to find your actual limits and capabilities." Maria settled into position for the 800-meter stage, calculating the required elevation adjustment of approximately 42 inches. The ballistic arc was now significant enough that small errors in range estimation could cause substantial vertical displacement of her shots. The wind analysis required her to break the bullet's flight path into segments, estimating the average deflection across each portion and calculating the cumulative effect on point of impact. The thermal activity was creating subtle but measurable air movements that would challenge her ability to time her shots properly. Through the scope, the 800-meter target appeared small and somewhat indistinct, requiring perfect sight alignment and steady hold to achieve acceptable accuracy. Maria controlled her breathing carefully, waiting for the natural respiratory pause that provided the most stable shooting platform. The first shot felt perfect: a smooth trigger break, minimal sight disturbance, immediate return to target for impact assessment. She watched the bullets trace through the scope, noting its arc and deflection as it flew toward the distant target. The impact appeared centered both vertically and horizontally, confirming that her ballistic calculations and wind analysis had been accurate. She fired the remaining 4 rounds with increasing confidence, each shot delivered during optimal environmental conditions. "Exceptional shooting," Morrison said as they examined the 800-meter target. "Group size is 1.9 inches with excellent centering. You've officially qualified at every standard distance with scores that match or exceed most of my operators." Maria felt a profound sense of accomplishment, knowing that she had validated years of technical study and practical preparation under the scrutiny of one of the military's most respected precision shooting instructors. But Morrison's expression suggested that the morning's challenges were not yet complete. "Now that you've proven your capabilities at standard distances," Morrison said, returning to the firing line, "I'd like to propose something more ambitious. Something that will really test whether your technical knowledge can handle extreme challenges." Maria followed him back to the equipment table, noticing that he was unpacking additional items from his range bag: a handheld weather meter, a ballistic calculator, and what appeared to be an extremely detailed range card with distances extending well beyond the standard course. "What did you have in mind?" she asked, though she suspected the answer would push her abilities to their absolute limits. Morrison pointed toward a distant ridge that rose beyond the standard target line. "See that rocky outcropping at the base of the far ridge? Rangefinder shows it at 3,800 meters, just over 2 miles. There's a steel target out there that we use for extreme distance training." Maria felt her pulse quicken as she realized what Morrison was proposing. A 3,800-meter shot would require ballistic calculations that pushed the .338 Lapua cartridge to its practical limits, environmental analysis that accounted for multiple atmospheric layers, and shooting technique that allowed no margin for error. "You want me to attempt a shot at 3,800 meters?" she asked, ensuring she understood correctly. "I want to see if your technical knowledge and demonstrated shooting ability can handle a real-world extreme distance challenge. This isn't part of any standard qualification course. This is about testing the absolute limits of what's possible with the equipment and skills you've demonstrated this morning." Maria looked toward the distant ridge, calculating the immense technical challenges that such a shot would require. The bullet's flight time would be several seconds, during which changing wind conditions could deflect it significantly. The ballistic drop would be measured in dozens of feet rather than inches, requiring perfect range estimation and atmospheric analysis. "That's an extremely difficult shot," she said honestly, "even for experienced long-range specialists." Morrison nodded seriously. "It is, which is why I'm interested to see if you're willing to attempt it. You've proven you can handle standard distances with exceptional skill. This would prove something entirely different, that you can apply your technical knowledge to solve problems that most shooters would consider impossible." Maria studied the distant target location through binoculars, noting the complex terrain and multiple environmental factors that would affect bullet flight over such an extreme distance. The challenge was both exciting and intimidating, representing the ultimate test of everything she had learned about precision shooting. If I attempt this shot, she said carefully, what support equipment and preparation time would be available? Morrison's smile returned. Whatever you need. Ballistic calculator, weather instruments, range estimation equipment, multiple spotting scopes. This isn't about testing you under time pressure. It's about seeing if you can systematically solve an extremely complex shooting problem. Maria felt the familiar excitement that came with tackling seemingly impossible technical challenges. This was exactly the kind of problem that drew her to precision shooting. The combination of physics, mathematics, environmental science, and human performance that separated exceptional results from merely adequate ones. All right, she said finally. Let's see what's possible at 3,800 meters. Morrison unpacked an array of sophisticated equipment that transformed their simple firing position into something resembling a ballistic laboratory. The ballistic calculator was a military-grade device capable of processing dozens of environmental variables, while the weather station could measure wind speed, direction, temperature, humidity, and barometric pressure with scientific precision. First step is gathering environmental data, Morrison explained, setting up the weather instruments. At 3,800 meters, small variations in atmospheric conditions can cause massive changes in bullet trajectory. We need to be absolutely precise about every measurement. Maria studied the ballistic calculator's display as Morrison input the basic weapon and ammunition specifications. The .338 Lapua cartridge he used was among the finest long-range rounds available, but even it would be operating near its practical limits at such extreme distance. Current conditions show temperature at 78 degrees Fahrenheit, humidity at 32%, and barometric pressure at 29.89 inches, Morrison reported. Wind at our position is showing 4 miles per hour from the northwest, but we'll need to estimate conditions across the entire flight path. Maria accepted the range finder and carefully measured the distance to the target. The laser device showed 3,847 meters, nearly 2.4 miles of terrain that included multiple elevation changes and varying ground cover that would affect air movement patterns. Ballistic drop is going to be approximately 1,180 inches, she calculated, working through the trajectory mathematics. That's almost 100 feet of vertical compensation required. The bullet will be in flight for nearly 6.5 seconds, which means any wind changes during that time could deflect it significantly. Morrison nodded approvingly. You're thinking like a long-range specialist now. This isn't just about precise shooting technique. It's about understanding physics and atmospheric science at a level that most people never need to consider. Through the spotting scope, Maria could barely make out the steel target positioned against the distant ridge. The target was a standard military silhouette measuring 19 inches wide by 40 inches tall, a reasonable size for normal shooting distances, but almost invisible at nearly 4,000 meters. Wind analysis is going to be critical, she observed, studying the multiple wind flags and natural indicators visible across the bullet's flight path. I can see at least 4 different wind patterns between here and the target, and there's probably thermal activity in the valleys that we can't observe directly. Morrison handed her a detailed topographical map of the area. The bullet's path crosses 3 distinct terrain features: the flat area near our position, a shallow valley at about 1,200 meters, and rising ground toward the target. Each area will have different wind characteristics based on topography and sun exposure. Maria studied the map carefully, noting how the terrain would channel and deflect air movement in ways that could dramatically affect her bullet's flight path. The shallow valley would likely create updrafts as the morning sun warmed its surface, while the rising ground near the target could produce complex turbulence patterns. I need to break the shot into segments and analyze wind effects for each portion, she decided. The early part of the flight will be affected by our local conditions, the middle section by thermal activity in the valley, and the final approach by terrain-induced turbulence near the target. Morrison set up additional spotting scopes, positioned to observe different segments of the bullet's flight path. I'll watch the early portion while you focus on sight picture and trigger control. My radio operator will position himself to observe the valley crossing, and we have someone with binoculars near the target area who can provide immediate feedback on impact location. The systematic approach to solving the extreme distance challenge reminded Maria of her most complex armorer work, problems that required careful analysis, systematic data gathering, and precise technical execution. This shot would test whether her methodical engineering mindset could be applied successfully to practical marksmanship under ultimate pressure. Elevation adjustment will be massive, she calculated, working through the ballistic data. I'll need to dial up nearly 300 minutes of angle, which is going to push this scope to its mechanical limits. Morrison watched her adjust the scope's elevation turret, noting the precise way she approached each mechanical setting. Most shooters get intimidated by the sheer scale of adjustments required for extreme distance work. You're treating it like any other technical problem that needs systematic solution. Maria settled into the prone position, using every available support to create the most stable shooting platform possible. At 3,800 meters, even tiny movements would be magnified into significant point of impact changes. She adjusted her position until the rifle pointed naturally toward the target without any muscular tension. Through the scope, the distant target was barely visible even at maximum magnification. She could make out the general outline of the steel silhouette, but precise aiming required faith in her calculations rather than clear visual reference points. Wind conditions look as stable as they're going to get, Morrison reported, monitoring the multiple observation points. Thermal activity is minimal, and the flags show consistent patterns across most of the flight path. Maria controlled her breathing, settling into the natural respiratory pause that provided maximum stability. The rifle felt solid beneath her, its precision components working in harmony to deliver the accuracy potential she needed for success at such extreme range. "Whenever you're ready," Morrison said quietly, "take your time and trust your calculations." Maria aligned the crosshairs with her calculated aiming point, a position nearly 3 feet above the visible target to compensate for the massive ballistic drop. The sight picture looked wrong to her eye, accustomed to aiming directly at intended targets, but the mathematics demanded precise adherence to calculated values. She applied steady pressure to the trigger, feeling the mechanism's crisp break point approaching. When the rifle fired, the recoil felt identical to her previous shots, but she knew this bullet faced a much longer and more challenging journey to its destination. Through the scope, she lost sight of the bullet's trace almost immediately as it arced high into the morning sky. Morrison called out observations from his spotting scope, tracking the projectile's early flight path and noting its trajectory relative to predicted values. "Good elevation, tracking slightly left of center," Morrison reported. "Looks like wind compensation was close but possibly conservative." The bullet's flight seemed to last forever, though Maria knew it was actually only about 6.5 seconds. She held her position behind the rifle, maintaining sight picture in case immediate follow-up shots were required based on impact observation. The radio crackled with reports from the observer near the target area. "Impact observed, approximately 2 meters left and 1 meter low, close enough to confirm that the ballistic calculation was essentially correct." Maria felt a surge of excitement mixed with analytical curiosity about the factors that had caused the minor deviation from perfect center. A miss of 2 meters at 3,800 meters represented shooting accuracy that exceeded most people's expectations, but she wanted to understand exactly what environmental factors had influenced the bullet's flight path. "Outstanding first attempt," Morrison said with genuine admiration. "You were within the target area on a shot that most experienced snipers would consider extremely challenging. That demonstrates exceptional technical preparation and shooting fundamentals." Maria remained focused on analyzing the results rather than celebrating the near hit. "The left deflection suggests my wind analysis was slightly conservative, probably for the valley crossing, where thermal activity created more drift than I calculated. The low impact might indicate that I underestimated the air density effects at this temperature and altitude." Morrison nodded approvingly. "You're thinking exactly like a professional long-range shooter. Most people would either celebrate the close miss or become frustrated with imperfection. You're already working on corrections for a second attempt." Maria studied her notes and recalculated the wind compensation based on the observed impact location. The bullet's deflection pattern provided valuable information about actual atmospheric conditions along the flight path, data that could significantly improve her accuracy on subsequent shots. "I'd like to try a second shot with adjusted wind compensation," she requested. "The elevation was essentially correct, but I can refine the windage calculation based on what we learned from the first impact. Morrison smiled broadly. Now you're talking like someone who understands that extreme distance shooting is an iterative process. Each shot provides data that improves subsequent attempts. Maria made careful adjustments to her scope settings, incorporating the new information about actual wind effects across the bullet's flight path. The systematic approach to problem-solving felt familiar and comfortable, similar to diagnosing complex mechanical problems in the armory. Conditions look consistent with the previous shot, Morrison reported. Wind patterns are holding steady and thermal activity remains minimal. You should have excellent conditions for your corrected attempt. Maria settled back into position, verifying that her body alignment and rifle support remained optimal. The second shot would test whether her analytical approach to extreme distance shooting could translate observed results into practical accuracy improvements. Through the scope, she aligned the crosshairs with her revised aiming point, incorporating both the original ballistic calculations and the wind correction derived from her first shot's impact location. The sight picture looked more confident this time, based on real-world data rather than purely theoretical calculations. The trigger brake felt identical to her first shot, but Maria sensed greater confidence in her environmental analysis. The bullet's arc carried it toward the distant target with trajectory that looked more precisely aligned with her intended impact point. Excellent elevation and windage tracking, Morrison called from his spotting scope. This one looks much more centered on the predicted flight path. The radio report from the target area came quickly. Direct hit, center mass of the target, outstanding shooting. Maria felt a profound sense of accomplishment that went beyond simple marksmanship success. She had systematically solved an extremely complex technical problem, applied theoretical knowledge under practical pressure, and demonstrated shooting ability that earned respect from one of the military's most demanding instructors. Morrison moved to congratulate her, but his expression suggested that the morning's challenges had revealed something significant about her capabilities that extended beyond basic qualification standards. Morrison stood beside the shooting position, staring toward the distant target with an expression of genuine amazement. In 23 years of military service and 12 years as a special operations sniper instructor, he had witnessed countless demonstrations of marksmanship skill. But Maria's systematic approach to extreme distance shooting represented something exceptional. "Santos, I need you to understand what just happened here," Morrison said, his voice carrying unusual gravity. That 3,800-meter shot wasn't just impressive shooting. It was a demonstration of technical expertise applied under pressure that exceeded what I see from most experienced long-range specialists. Maria packed her equipment methodically, still processing the morning's events. The successful extreme distance shot felt like validation of years spent studying ballistics, environmental factors, and precision shooting theory. But she sensed that Morrison's evaluation carried implications beyond simple marksmanship assessment. "You approached that impossible shot like an engineering problem," Morrison continued. "Systematic data gathering, careful analysis, precise execution, and immediate incorporation of feedback for improvement. That's exactly how the best snipers in special operations think about their work." The radio crackled with confirmations from the various observation positions, all reporting the successful target impact and requesting permission to secure their positions. Morrison acknowledged the reports while continuing to study Maria with an expression that suggested he was evaluating possibilities that hadn't existed before this morning. "What I witnessed today changes my assessment of your capabilities significantly," Morrison said. "You've proven that your technical knowledge translates directly to practical application under the most demanding conditions. That combination of theoretical understanding and practical execution is extremely rare." Maria finished packing the ballistic calculator and weather instruments, her mind already shifting toward the implications of Morrison's growing interest in her demonstrated abilities. The successful qualification at standard distances had been personally satisfying, but the extreme distance shot had apparently revealed something that Morrison considered professionally significant. "I appreciate the evaluation opportunity," Maria replied. "This morning helped me understand how much I've learned over the years and where my actual capabilities stand relative to professional standards." Morrison shouldered his equipment and began walking back toward the base facilities. Santos, I want to discuss something with you that goes beyond this morning's shooting assessment. Your performance today suggests capabilities that could be valuable to this unit in ways we hadn't previously considered. Maria fell into step beside Morrison, sensing that the conversation was moving toward opportunities that could significantly change her role within the special operations community. The respect she had earned through technical expertise was evolving into something more substantial based on demonstrated practical performance. Our team has been discussing the need for additional precision shooting capability, Morrison explained. We've got excellent operators, but extreme distance work requires specialized knowledge and skills that most people never develop to your level. They walked through the morning heat toward the base facilities, passing other personnel who nodded respectfully to Morrison, while showing curiosity about Maria's presence during what appeared to be serious professional discussion. The kind of shooting you demonstrated this morning, systematic analysis, precise execution, rapid correction for improved accuracy, represents exactly what we need for certain types of operations that require extreme distance capability. Maria understood the implications immediately. Morrison was suggesting that her role could expand beyond weapon maintenance into operational support that would utilize her precision shooting abilities alongside her technical expertise. You're talking about potential inclusion in operational activities, she said, ensuring she understood correctly. Morrison nodded. I'm talking about expanding your role to include precision shooting support when missions require extreme distance capability. Your technical knowledge combined with demonstrated shooting ability makes you uniquely qualified for that kind of work. They reached the armory building where Maria's day had begun with routine weapon maintenance. The morning's events had transformed a simple scope repair into a comprehensive evaluation that revealed capabilities Morrison hadn't suspected existed within his unit's support personnel. What would that expanded role involve? Maria asked, unlocking the armory door and inviting Morrison inside to continue their conversation privately. Morrison set down his equipment and leaned against the workbench where Maria had repaired his scope the previous afternoon. Specialized mission support when operations require precision shooting at distances that exceed normal capabilities. Environmental analysis, ballistic calculation, and extreme distance shooting when tactical situations demand it. Maria considered the proposition carefully, understanding that Morrison was offering opportunities that few people ever received in special operations units. The chance to apply her technical knowledge in operational contexts represented validation of her professional development and recognition of abilities that went beyond traditional support roles. That kind of work would require additional training and evaluation, she observed. Operational readiness involves more than shooting ability. Morrison smiled. Additional training would definitely be required, but the foundation you've demonstrated, technical expertise, systematic thinking, precision execution under pressure, suggests you could handle the expanded responsibilities successfully. Maria looked around the armory that had been her professional home for 18 months, thinking about the satisfaction she found in maintaining and repairing the weapons that supported critical missions. The possibility of expanding into operational roles represented evolution rather than abandonment of her technical specialization. I'd be interested in pursuing additional training and evaluation, she decided. This morning showed me capabilities I hadn't fully tested, and I'd like to see how far those abilities can be developed. Morrison extended his hand for the second time in 2 days, but this handshake carried different significance than their original agreement about the shooting assessment. This represented mutual recognition of professional capabilities and commitment to expanded responsibilities. I'll speak with the command about incorporating you into our advanced precision shooting program, Morrison promised. Your performance today will carry significant weight in those discussions. After Morrison left, Maria returned to her normal duties, but everything felt different now. The routine weapon maintenance tasks that had occupied her time for months now represented preparation for expanded responsibilities that would utilize her technical knowledge in ways she had never anticipated. The Barrett M82 rifle that she had been cleaning when Morrison first challenged her capabilities remained on the workbench, partially disassembled, but forgotten during the morning's shooting activities. She resumed the maintenance work with renewed understanding of how technical expertise and practical application combined to create professional opportunities. As she worked through the familiar process of cleaning and reassembling the precision weapon, Maria reflected on the morning's transformation from routine armorer to qualified precision shooting specialist. The systematic approach that served her well in technical work had proven equally valuable in practical marksmanship under demanding conditions. The successful 3,800-meter shot represented more than exceptional marksmanship. It demonstrated that years of technical study and practical preparation had created capabilities that Morrison considered operationally valuable. The respect she had earned through weapon maintenance expertise was evolving into recognition as a complete precision shooting professional. By afternoon, word of Maria's shooting performance had spread throughout the forward operating base. Other operators stopped by the armory to congratulate her and discuss the implications of having advanced precision shooting capability available within their unit's support structure. "Heard you can actually shoot those rifles as well as fix them," commented Staff Sergeant Rodriguez, one of the team's designated marksmen. "Morrison's been telling everyone about your extreme distance work this morning." Maria continued her weapon maintenance while acknowledging the growing recognition of her expanded capabilities. The successful demonstration had created exactly the kind of respect Morrison had predicted: acceptance based on proven practical ability rather than technical knowledge alone. "Just applied the same systematic approach to shooting that I use for maintenance work," Maria replied. "Understanding the equipment and environmental factors makes the practical application more predictable." As evening approached, Maria completed her routine maintenance tasks and secured the armory for the night. Tomorrow would bring normal duties, but also the beginning of expanded training that could lead to operational responsibilities she had never imagined when she first accepted assignment as the unit's armorer. The conversation with Morrison had revealed possibilities that extended far beyond her original professional goals. The combination of technical expertise and demonstrated shooting ability had created opportunities to contribute to mission success in ways that utilized every aspect of her professional development. Walking back to her quarters, Maria reflected on how a simple scope repair had evolved into life-changing professional recognition. The challenge Morrison had proposed as a test of her shooting ability had become validation of capabilities that could shape her entire career in special operations support. The evening air carried the familiar sounds of the forward operating base, winding down from another day of operations. Maria felt profound satisfaction knowing that her technical knowledge and practical skills had earned recognition from professionals who demanded excellence in every aspect of their work. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and opportunities to prove that her morning's performance represented consistent capability rather than exceptional luck. The systematic approach that had enabled her extreme distance success would continue to guide her development as both technical specialist and precision shooting professional. The successful 3,800-meter shot had proven that years of preparation and study could create abilities that exceeded even her own expectations. Morrison's recognition of those capabilities represented the beginning of expanded responsibilities that would utilize every aspect of her professional development in service of mission success.